Good morning. This is Cecil and Blues. Thank you for joining me for this Final Fantasy XIV video. The final Alliance raid for Heavensward has released today, and it is Dun Scaith. I would like to give you a quick survival guide for its bosses. The first boss is Deathgaze. Because much of his hitbox is unreachable, Deathgaze does not have positional requirements for melee DPS. For the same reason, be cautious with charge attacks, because they will most likely take you off the edge of the ship. Deathgaze has many abilities that will kill you instantly if you do not react to the mechanic correctly. Here is a list of his abilities. First, Void Death. This will pull all players to the center of a large circular telegraph. A few seconds later, it will pulse a second time with less strength. Anyone who is inside the circle after the second pulse will be killed. As soon as you are pulled, start running in a direction and do not turn until you know that you are safe. Casters who do not use their TP for combat can use Sprint to aid their escape, but it should not be necessary. The next ability, Void Arrow 2, will target 3 members of the raid with green marks. When the cast finishes, it will deal AoE damage and spawn a tornado at the location of the player. If you are targeted, move somewhere out of the way. The next ability, Void Blizzard 3, casts a large cone telegraph across the ship. There will be several safe breaks in the middle. Stand in one of the safe places. Void Arrow 3 will spawn a large tornado in the center of the arena. After approximately 5 seconds, it will burst and push everyone in the raid away from its center. Position yourself so that you blow into one of the walls of the arena and not off the side of the ship. The next ability, Doom, places Doom on 2 players in each party. It must be cleansed by the healers. Bolt of Darkness shoots across the bow at the tank's position and will apply a bleed. If you are not the tank, try not to stand in a line with the tank. Void Blizzard 4 will drop 2 large ice chunks on the ship. Move away from their point of impact to reduce damage taken, and then line up with one of them to avoid being pushed off the side of the ship by the follow-up Gust of Wind, which is caused by Void Arrow 4. They are always cast in succession. Void Death 4 is a special ability. As the fight progresses, Deathgaze will place additional square void zones on the deck of the ship. These will be permanent. They are safe to stand in for most of the fight, but they will begin to flash when he is casting Void Death 4. Move out of them before the cast finishes, or you will be killed. There are also adds that will occasionally spawn during this fight. They are called Void Spirits, and they do not have a ton of health. You should kill them as quickly as possible to eliminate any additional damage that they do. Continue to deal with these mechanics until the target is dead. The next boss is Ferdie. He will throw out whirling scythes occasionally without warning. Don't stand in them. Also avoid standing in front of the boss to avoid getting cleaved. The first ability you will notice him casting is Wormhole. The boss will spawn a number of Atmoses around the room and shoot a ball of energy into one or more of them. The ball will exit from a second Atmos around the room that has a matching color. There are 2 different types of orbs. White orbs, you must move away from their predicted return point, while golden orbs, you will want to move towards their predicted spawn point. This mechanic gets more tricky as the fight gets further on. There will be more Atmoses to distinguish which ones are which color, and there will be multiple orbs thrown out, different combinations of orbs, so you just kind of have to pay attention. The damage from one explosion is survivable, but it is not fun to heal, so try to avoid putting that strain on your healers. The next ability, Jester's Reap, is a frontal cone that everyone, including the tank, should move out of. Jungler's X is a tank buster attack. Healers should keep the tank topped off when they see this casting, and tanks should use a mitigation cooldown. Debilitator will put either water resistance down or fire resistance down on the entire raid. At the same time, it will spawn a dozen or so small circle zones around the arena with either a fire or water affinity. Entering one of these zones will cause it to switch its affinity. All circles must be switched to the opposite of the weakness that the raid was given. You do not need to be standing in the circle to be safe. It is the color of the circle that determines how much damage the raid will be taking. It is possible to survive this ability if one or two of the circles are not properly switched, but any more than that, and it is almost certainly a wipe. This mechanic is easily bungled when too many players are trying to take charge of a single circle at the same time. If you see other players tackling it, back away, let them get it under control. There is an ads phase in this fight. It is a mild DPS check. The ads will teleport around the room occasionally, but once in position, they will not move. This prevents tanks from rounding them up and the raid from using AoE. After the ads phase, the boss gains 2 additional abilities. Black Fire will place several circles around the room that will grow in size until they eventually explode. There is always a safe place, so try and map it out in your head before they finish growing. And then the final ability is Black Bolt. This is a shared damage attack placed on a random raid member. Not hard by itself, but as the rest of the encounter starts to play out, many of these abilities start to stack on top of each other, and it creates a rather hectic situation. But if you can make your way through it, that is everything that the fight has to surprise you with. The next boss is Scaith. Many of her attacks cause a stacking vulnerability debuff, so be sure to avoid what you can. In fact, Scaith has just a lot of abilities, so sorry this may get a little bit long. First of all, about 15 seconds into the fight, Scaith will perform a close-range AoE attack called 30 Thorns, with almost no warning. There may be some visual cue that I was missing through all the player spell effects, but it always happens at about 15 seconds in, so melee DPS, be sure to back away in anticipation to avoid a vulnerability stacked. As far as I could tell, this only happened once. She will also perform a similar attack, which is called Shade Smite, after charging out of melee range, again, fairly early on in the fight. To my knowledge, this only happens once as well. It may repeat if Phase 1 goes on longer than normal, but I did not encounter this in my fights. The next ability that you will see casting is Shade Spin. This is another attack that if you wait for the telegraph, it will be hard to avoid. But while she is casting Shade Spin, the scarf on her back will position to point in the 2 directions the damage is going to come from. So reposition yourself so that you are in the middle where the 2 scarf halves join up on her back. This is not always directly behind her. It may be a little bit to the left, it may be a little bit to the right. Watch where her arms are pointing, her scarf arms, her extra arms, and move to that. The next ability that she does with her scarf, maybe not immediately, is Shade Thrust. This is a straight line attack. It will go straight ahead of her, whichever direction she is currently facing. So if you see she's casting Shade Thrust, move to the side. The next ability, 30 Sickles, is an untelegraphed melee range AoE that does not add a stack of vulnerability. As far as I could tell, there's really no way to predict this. The next ability, Shadow Lynx, is a debuff placed on the raid after the warning, Shadows Gather on the Floor. It is a snare and a strong damage over time. It can be healed through. I did notice that sometimes not everyone in the raid got it. I was completely unclear as to if that is a range thing or if it is related to something else. I don't even want to guess. I hate doing that in a guide. I do not entirely understand how that mechanic works currently. Next, 30 Souls is a room-wide AoE that cannot be avoided. Scaith will place a red crosshair occasionally on a player. She usually shouts something when she does it, like time to try a different tactic. And this will drop giant gravity balls on that person that chase her, similar to abilities other bosses have used. Just kite, if you get targeted, kite this away from the raid so that you don't do extra damage to other players who don't know that you're kiting it. The boss has several different ads that you have to worry about. The first one that you will see will enter the fight via a meteor telegraph, so move away from its point of impact to avoid some extra damage, and then it, as an ad, must be tanked away from the boss. The name of the ad is the Conla. It will link to the boss and provide an empowerment buff, so make sure to keep them separated. The ad will also cast a room-wide AoE and should be killed with priority. Another type of ad you will see over the course of the fight is 2 shadow limbs will spawn, and when they do, they will link to a player and start running towards them. If they reach their target, it is a one-shot kill. To stop them from chasing you, turn and face them. They'll freeze in place like ghosts in Super Mario Brothers. They will switch links occasionally, so you will have to be vigilant. They must also be killed with priority to avoid, just chaos. The boss will enter a cocoon at the midpoint of the encounter and spawn several waves of ads. Once this phase ends, the boss will perform her super, causing a raid wipe if the ads were not killed in time. This is a mediocre DPS check. It shouldn't be too challenging, assuming, like in this footage, that half your raid doesn't disconnect due to, patch problems. Scaith gains one new ability after the cocoon phase, 30 arrows, which generates a starburst telegraph. There's enough time to get out of this one when it starts coming, so you just keep an eye out for it. Also at this time, the well-known meteor mechanic starts making an appearance, where players have to go stand in the meteor locations to avoid raid-wide damage, and there will also be a shared damage attack that I did not catch the name of. The boss will continue to spawn ads and mostly alternate between 30 souls and 30 arrows for the remainder of the fight. Things got a little out of control in this footage because of the multiple disconnects that I mentioned. But she did die. I guess you'll have to take my word for it as we move on to the next boss. The next boss, turn your back when the eye telegraphs, kill doors to avoid ads, group up for the shared damage attack, don't stand in front of the boss, it does have a cleave. Also, Ultimate Terror can be silent, so use your silence for that instead of trying to milk out some extra DPS. Anything else? Nah, I can't think of anything else. Alright, well, I'm being a little bit glib here, but the fight isn't too hard. Most of the mechanics you're going to have seen before, and you want a little bit of surprise, don't you? Have a good time.